interest in you and your business, so we're running these weekly Business Lunchtime Talks, and let's see how together we can put the Bible back into business. My name is Trevor Boyd, and I'm the minister here in First Rathfriland Presbyterian Church, and you can find out more about us by visiting our YouTube channel. If you click the subscribe button, you'll be able to keep in touch with our weekly updates. Today, we're thinking about the leadership of a young woman called Esther, under the title Esther the Encourager. And to set the scene, we're going to read some verses from a book named after Esther, starting in chapter 2. And Mordecai had brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman was lovely and beautiful. When her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So it was when the king's command and decree were heard, and when many young women were gathered at Shushan, the citadel, under the custody of Hegai, that Esther also was taken into the king's palace, into the care of Hegai, the custodian of the women. Now the young woman pleased him, and she obtained his favour. So he readily gave beauty preparations to her besides her allowance. Then 7 choice maidservants were provided for her from the king's palace. And he moved her and her maidservants to the best place in the house of the women. Esther had not revealed her people or family, for Mordecai had charged her not to reveal it. The king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she obtained grace and favour in his sight more than all the virgins. So he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Today we're going to simply parachute in to the life of Esther and pick up a few leadership examples or characteristics and see how they might apply to your business or to your situation. Today, as we focus on this young girl called Esther, in some ways it takes centre stage in this Cinderella story that takes Esther from rags to riches. Esther, who is someone who could help to bring you encouragement in your work situation at this time. Esther, we've read there, well, she was an orphan. She was raised and loved by her cousin Mordecai. Now, if you've been raised as an orphan or in a single parent family, well, then you can appreciate what Esther was going through. You can appreciate that it wasn't all sunshine. Before J.K. Rowling had the idea for Harry Potter, the writer was a single mother. She was struggling to pay her rent, and Rowling battled depression and other obstacles before becoming one of the most successful female writers in recent history, as well as one of the most loved British authors of all time. And today, her net worth stands at around 100 million, with 7 Harry Potter novels and a hugely successful movie franchise. So that in itself is a bit of a Cinderella story, how that single parent struggling came through to mature and to grow and to prosper in her given field of literature. As a gorgeous young Jewish woman, Esther was also a refugee. She is chosen from loads of other young women to replace Queen Vashti. There's been a bizarre arrangement going on in this book of Esther. There was like a Miss World contest where all these young women were brought before the king, and he had chosen Esther from amongst all the others to be the queen. But in many ways, the king had chosen a woman who had everything taken from her. And there are people in life and they seem to have a lot of things taken away. Indeed, there are those who have been blessed with much, and all of a sudden, at the flick of a pen, the flick of a switch, a decision that has went wrong, they have it all taken away from them. And Esther, well, she had a list of things that were taken from her. She had her homeland taken from her. She had her parents taken from her. Her home was taken away. Her freedom was taken away. Her singleness was taken away. And yet the king came and sought to give her everything. In this story, someone who, due to gender, culture, and circumstances, was powerless, was invisible, then was moved from that rags to riches situation of becoming a pivotal and formidable person. Esther, she had married into this royal family, and gradually over the years her influence deepens. Some folks, they marry into the family business or marry into a business, and they have to get to grips with all the hard work, the long hours, the decisions and the pressures and tensions that it brings. And no doubt Esther appreciated some of that pressure and tension of the royal court as she came from the outside into it. Esther had no experience of royalty, so no doubt it was a culture shock. In business, each company has its own culture, and sometimes, as we've said, that too can take a bit of getting used to, whether we are male or female. Or maybe today you're a young person and you're finding it tough in your place of work. Maybe you're finding it tough because you're in a business or an industry that's dominated by the opposite sex to you. Years before Halle Berry won an Oscar, she had ended up sleeping in a homeless shelter. She was a struggling actress, desperately wanting to make it big in Hollywood. And the star, well, she sought out cheaper housing alternatives to try and survive while she was looking for work and trying to build up a reputation in Hollywood. And she says, however, that her struggles during her early acting career made her stronger in the end. And that's often in life why we have those struggles and trials, the times when things don't go right, because they then are used to make us into the person that we have become. Esther, I trust, can be an encouragement to you. She had put up with many discouragements in her life. By spending some time focusing on Esther as an individual and addressing the very real and horrible things that this woman of God endured, we're able to more clearly see her character. We're able to more clearly see her courage and God's redemptive love at work, despite the sins of man. Maybe the leadership and the example of Esther can give you inspiration, can give you encouragement as you seek to understand and indeed to find maybe your role in life and in business. Well, God, he was preparing this orphaned Jewish girl to save her people. She had a big role in front of her that she had no idea about. But she was asked to practice being a servant leader. A servant leader, as we talked about at one point in our study of Nehemiah, is someone who rises up the ranks. And sometimes we think that influential and successful people are leaders due to special skills and abilities, special powers that allow them to sweep in and to save the day. And it's a message that our culture sends out, and more often than not, we believe it. But servant leaders are those, yes, with skills and abilities and powers, but they act differently. They are people who mature and develop slowly and gradually over time. There's no race to the top, but they naturally appear to rise to the top. And so as a servant leader, Esther was patient. And so you too need to be patient in your role as you climb the corporate ladder. It may not be happening fast enough, but it takes time to mature and develop and grow. And servant leaders can have significant fears. They can even have doubts of what the future holds, or can they do the job. But Esther gives encouragement that if you stick at the job, if you are faithful in what you've been asked to do, that you in turn and in time will rise to that position that is meant for you. Esther, she was reserved. She wasn't putting herself forward in the limelight, but yet in all, she was brought to the top. She was of a different race. She was from a different country, but those things and her situation as an orphan, those things weren't blockages to her progress. And so we're mindful that we can rise up the corporate ladder. We can develop and prosper in business despite our history, despite our background. Esther is someone who rose up despite all, we would say, the barriers and obstacles that were placed in her way. She rose from being an orphan Jewish lady to being the queen of the nation, who then was used to save her people, and we'll see a wee bit more about that next time. So we trust that Esther will excite you and give you some encouragement, that she will encourage those who have come from what we would call a disadvantaged or a difficult background, and give you the opportunity to see that there is a brighter future ahead. And so we leave it there this week, and trust that you'll be able to click in and join us next week to learn more about the leadership of Esther. So in the meantime, thanks for dropping by, and we'll see you the same place, same time next week. Take care.